My son married a wife who looks more like a maid than a daughter-in-law. Mocking laughter rang out with a few voices adding, "She brought no dowry, clearly just a freeloader." The young woman sat quietly, her hands clenched beneath the table, though her gaze remained steady. They thought she had accepted her fate, that a poor marriage meant nothing at all. But then as the hall erupted in cheers over a billion-dollar deal with a mysterious billionaire, the giant screen lit up. The name that appeared froze everyone in place. The very man they had just called penniless was in fact the secret billionaire behind a vast technology empire. In an instant, the supposed joke became the one holding the entire family's destiny in his hands. Selena Marquez sat there, her fingers still curled tight, but her face didn't flinch. The room was a glittering cage crystal chandeliers, gold-trimmed plates, and people dripping in designer clothes. She wore a plain navy dress, no jewelry, no makeup. Her dark hair was pulled back in a low bun, neat but unremarkable. To them, she looked like she didn't belong. To her, that was fine. She wasn't here to impress. She was here because Damien, her husband, asked her to come. And now, with the laughter still echoing, she felt the weight of every stare. It wasn't new. She'd felt it her whole life, people sizing her up, deciding she wasn't enough. But this time it cut deeper. This was his family. These were the people who were supposed to welcome her. Instead, they tore her apart before she could even say hello. The Crowell mansion was massive, all marble floors and towering windows that caught the sunset like a painting. Selena stepped inside that day, her flats clicking softly on the polished stone. She'd spent hours picking the dress simple, modest, something that wouldn't scream for attention. Damien had squeezed her hand in the car, his voice low. "You look perfect." She'd smiled, but her stomach twisted. She knew what was coming. Helena Crowell. Damien's mother stood at the top of the staircase, her silk gown shimmering, her hair swept up like a queen. Her eyes locked on Selena, scanning her from head to toe. The room went quiet. Then Helena's voice sliced through. "My son's wife looks more like the help than a daughter-in-law." The words landed like a slap. A few guests chuckled, their wine glasses glinting as they leaned closer to each other. A woman in a sequined dress, her lips painted red, leaned toward her husband. She must have married him for his looks. What else does she have? Her voice wasn't even a whisper. It was meant to be heard. Selena's fingers brushed the edge of her napkin, folding it once, then again. She didn't look up. Across the room, a man in a tailored suit, his watch screaming money, muttered to his date, "No dowry, no status." "She's just leeching off him." That was Adrian Volk, the family's lawyer, his smile sharp as a blade. He sipped his drink, eyes never leaving Selena, like he was waiting for her to break. Damien sat beside her, his hand finding hers under the table. His grip was firm, but he didn't say a word. Not yet. As the servers moved through the room, one of them, a young man with nervous hands, set a plate in front of Selena. It was the wrong dish, plain chicken instead of the elaborate steak everyone else got. A woman nearby, her earrings dangling like chandeliers, noticed and smirked. Oh look, they gave her the staff meal. The table erupted in snickers. Selena glanced at the plate, then at the server, who flushed red and stammered an apology. She waved it off gently, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's fine. I like chicken." The server froze, then nodded, backing away. The woman with the earrings rolled her eyes. "So gracious," she said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. Selena picked up her fork, her movements slow and precise, and started eating. The room watched, waiting for a crack in her calm. It didn't come. Selena lifted her water glass, her movements slow, deliberate. She took a sip, set it down, and then reached into her bag. She pulled out a handkerchief, white with a faint embroidered pattern, and offered it to Helena, who'd just spilled a drop of wine on her sleeve. "Here," Selena said, her voice soft but steady. Helena snatched it, then froze, her eyes narrowing at the fabric. "Cheap thing," she scoffed, tossing it onto the table. A guest nearby, a thin man with slick-back hair and a smug grin, squinted at the handkerchief. His brow furrowed. The embroidery wasn't just any design. It was the rare logo of the Crowell Foundation, something only insiders would recognize. He opened his mouth, then shut it. Selena caught his glance and smiled faintly. "A gift from my husband," she said. The room erupted in laughter. "Must be a knockoff," a woman in pearls sneered. Selena just folded her hands and looked away. In the hallway later, as guests mingled, Selena stood by a window, her reflection faint against the glass. A memory flickered her standing in a cramped apartment, Damien handing her that same handkerchief, his eyes soft. "Something to remind you of me," he'd said. She had laughed, then tucking it into her pocket. Now her fingers brushed it again, still in her bag. A woman in a velvet gown approached her, perfume overwhelming. "You're in the way," she said, gesturing at the view. Selena stepped aside, her face neutral. "Sorry," she said, her voice even. The woman huffed, then whispered to her friend, "She's got no class standing there like a lost puppy." Selena's hand paused on her bag, but she didn't turn. She just looked out the window, her eyes catching the faint outline of a car like the one Damien used to drive her in back when life was simpler. The dinner dragged on the air, thick with judgment. Helena made a point of directing the servers to skip Selena when they poured the expensive wine. "She wouldn't appreciate it," Helena said loudly, her lips curling. Adrian leaned back in his chair, smirking. "Right. No place at this table for someone without status." Another guest, a middle-aged woman with too tight Botox and a diamond necklace, giggled. "Don't let her near the good stuff. She might spill it." The table laughed again, a sharp, cruel sound. Selena's fork paused mid-air just for a second before she set it down. Her eyes met the woman's across the table. "I'm good with water," she said, her voice calm, almost gentle. The woman blinked, her laugh, faltering. The room didn't notice, but that moment hung there heavy. During a lull, a man in a pinstriped suit, his voice loud from too much wine, pointed at Selena's bag, a simple leather tote, nothing flashy. "What's in there?" "Your life savings." The room chuckled, heads turning. Selena's lips curved, not quite a smile. She reached into the bag, pulling out a small notebook, its cover worn but clean. "Just notes," she said, setting it on the table. The man snorted. "Notes? For what?" "How to marry up." The laughter was louder this time, cutting. Selena flipped the notebook open, revealing neat handwriting and a single word visible asterisk, Crowell. "Asterisk?" The man stopped laughing, his eyes narrowing, but he didn't say anything. Selena closed the notebook, tucking it back in her bag. The room moved on, but a few guests exchanged glances, uneasy. Damien's jaw tightened, his fingers twitching like he wanted to speak. Helena shot him a look, her voice low and cutting. "Don't you dare, Damien." He stayed quiet, but his hand never left Selena's. She didn't pull away. She didn't shrink. She sat there, her back straight, her eyes scanning the room like she was memorizing every face, every word. The guests kept going, their voices growing bolder. A man in a velvet jacket leaned forward. "Honestly, Damien, what were you thinking? You could have done better." Selena's lips parted just enough to let out a soft breath. She turned her head slightly, her gaze locking on him. "Could he?" she asked. Just 2 words. The man froze, his smirk fading. Nobody laughed that time. As the servers cleared plates, a woman in a silver dress, her nails painted to match, leaned towards Selena. "You must feel so out of place," she said, her voice syrupy with fake pity. "All this must be so much." Selena set her napkin down, her fingers brushing the tablecloth. "I'm used to it," she said, her tone even. The woman blinked, thrown off by the calm. She tried again, louder. "I mean, this world. It's not for everyone." Selena looked at her, her eyes steady, unblinking. "It's just a room," she said. The woman's face tightened, her smile, slipping. The table around them went quiet for a moment, the air heavy with something unspoken. The evening wore on, and the insults didn't stop. They came from every corner, snide comments about her dress, her plain shoes, the way she held her fork. Each one was a little cut, designed to make her flinch. But Selena didn't. She listened, she nodded, she sipped her water. When a server accidentally bumped her chair, a woman in a fur stole hissed, "Careful, don't ruin her outfit." The sarcasm dripped. Selena turned, her eyes steady. "It's washable," she said. The woman's face twitched like she'd expected a bigger reaction. Selena went back to her plate, cutting her food with the same calm precision she'd carried all night. Later in the powder room, Selena stood at the sink, washing her hands. A group of women entered, their heels, clicking, their laughter sharp. One of them, a brunette in an emerald gown, spotted Selena and smirked. "Oh, you're still here," she said, checking her lipstick in the mirror. "I thought you'd have run off by now." Selena dried her hands, her movements slow. She looked at the woman in the mirror, her eyes calm but piercing. "Why would I?" she asked. The woman's laugh caught in her throat, her friends exchanging glances. Selena folded the towel, placed it down, and walked out her steps, even her head high. The door closed softly behind her, but the silence in the room was deafening. By the time dessert was served, the room felt like a battlefield. Helena stood, raising her glass for a toast. "To the Crowell legacy," she said, her voice booming. "And to the New Deal, we just signed a 1." $2 billion contract with a mystery CEO. The guests clapped their excitement loud and genuine. Selena tilted her head, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Who's the CEO?" she asked, her voice cutting through the noise. Helena blinked, caught off guard. Adrian laughed, leaning forward. "Some big shot who doesn't show his face. Not that you'd know him." The guests chuckled again, dismissing her. Selena took a slow sip of her water. "Sounds interesting," she said. The table laughed harder. "Oh, honey, stick to what, a man in a bow tie said," shaking his head. In the quiet moment after the toast, a server approached Selena holding a tray of desserts. He hesitated, then whispered, "Ma'am, this was sent for you." He placed a small plate in front of her, a single tart with a delicate flower garnish. The room noticed heads turning. A man with a loud tie scoffed. "What's this? Special treatment for the charity case." Selena looked at the tart, then at the server, who avoided her eyes. She picked up her fork, breaking off a piece, and ate it slowly. The room watched, waiting for her to say something. She didn't, but her eyes flicked to Damien, who was watching her, his face unreadable. The server slipped away, but not before dropping a small card on the table. It read asterisk from D. Ad asterisk. The room didn't see it, but Selena's fingers brushed it, tucking it into her bag. Selena set her glass down, her fingers brushing the edge of the table. She didn't respond, but her eyes flicked to Damien just for a moment. He was staring at his plate, his knuckles white around his fork. The room didn't notice, but something in that glance felt different, like a secret passing between them. The kind of look you give someone when you know something they don't. The guests kept talking, their voices loud, oblivious, but a server in the corner, a young woman with wide eyes, hesitated as she cleared a plate. She'd seen something, a paper sticking out of Selena's bag, the corner embossed with that same Crowell Foundation logo. She didn't say anything, but her hands shook as she walked away. The next event was worse. The Crowell family's annual gala held in a ballroom that could have swallowed a small house. Gold drapes, live music, and a crowd of people who lived for status. Selena walked in her same plain dress swapped for a black one, just as simple. No one noticed the way the fabric fell perfectly, or how her posture carried a quiet strength. They only saw what they wanted, nobody trying to blend in. Helena was in her element, gliding through the crowd, her diamond earrings catching the light. She spotted Selena and stopped dead. "You're sitting at the end," she said, pointing to a chair near the server's station. "That's where you belong." The words were loud, deliberate. Heads turned. As Selena walked to her seat, a man in a silk suit brushed past her, his elbow grazing her arm. He didn't apologize. Instead, he turned to his companion, a woman in a glittering shawl, and said, "Careful, don't trip over the help." The woman laughed, her voice carrying across the room. Selena paused just for a moment, her hand tightening on her bag. She kept walking, her steps steady, and sat down. The man smirked, thinking he had won. But Selena reached into her bag, pulling out a small pen, and began writing in her notebook. The room didn't see the words, but the man's smirk faltered when she looked up, her eyes locking on his. "I'll remember that," she said, her voice soft but sharp. He turned away, his face red. Adrian was quick to jump in, his voice, smooth but vicious. "Exactly. No status, no seat at the main table." A woman nearby, her hair piled high with pins, smirked. "Don't let her touch the wine. She'll probably sell the bottle for rent money." The crowd laughed, a low, ugly sound. Selena walked to the end of the table, her steps measured. She sat down, her hands folding neatly in her lap. Damien started to stand, his chair scraping, but Helena's voice cut through. "Sit down, Damien." He froze, his eyes dark, but he sank back into his seat. Selena didn't look at him. She didn't need to. Her silence was enough. During the gala, a string quartet played their music, soft but piercing. Selena listened, her fingers tapping lightly on the table. A woman in a red gown, her lipstick too bright, leaned over. "Do you even know what this music is? Or is it just noise to you?" Selena's fingers stopped tapping. She turned her head, her eyes calm but direct. "It's Vivaldi," she said. The woman blinked, her smile slipping. "Well, good guess," she muttered, turning away. Selena went back to listening, her fingers resuming their rhythm. A man nearby, his cufflinks gleaming, whispered to his date. She probably Googled it. Selena's lips twitched, almost a smile, but she didn't respond. The music swelled, and for a moment, she closed her eyes, letting it wash over her. The gala continued, the insults sharper now. A man in a tux, his cufflinks flashing, leaned over. "This must be so overwhelming for you, huh? All this wealth." Selena tilted her head, her eyes meeting his. "I'm managing," she said. He blinked, thrown off, and turned away. Another guest, a woman with a fake tan and a louder laugh, pointed at Selena's shoes. Goodwill specials. Brave choice. Selena glanced down, then back up. They're comfortable, she said. The woman's smile faltered like she'd thrown a punch and missed. Selena's calm was unnerving, like a wall they couldn't break. Halfway through the night, a young man barely out of college approached Selena with a glass of champagne. You look like you need this, he said, his tone mocking. He held it out, but his grip was loose, and the glass tipped, splashing her dress. The room gasped, then laughed. Oh, clumsy me, he said, grinning. Selena stood, her dress wet, and reached for a napkin. She dabbed at the stain, her movements calm, her face unreadable. The young man laughed louder, expecting her to run. Instead, she looked at him, her eyes steady. You should be more careful, she said, her voice low. He stopped laughing, his face paling. The room moved on, but his hands shook as he walked away. The night took a turn when Helena stood again, this time to announce the family's legacy. This marriage, she said, her eyes locked on Selena, as a stain on our name. The room went silent, the kind of quiet that feels like a held breath. Adrian leaned forward, his voice oily. Damien's broke. He dragged this nobody into our world. A man in the crowd, his tie loose from too much wine, laughed. They're a joke, both of them. Selena's hands stilled on the table. Damien's face was stone, his eyes fixed on his mother. The air felt thick, like something was about to snap. As the crowd murmured, a woman in a gold dress, her voice loud and confident, stood up. Let's be honest, she said, addressing the room. She doesn't even know how to act in a place like this. She gestured at Selena, who was adjusting her napkin. Look at her fiddling like a nervous schoolgirl. The room laughed, heads nodding. Selena's hands paused, her fingers brushing the napkin's edge. She looked up, her eyes meeting the woman's. I'm just listening, she said, her voice soft but clear. The woman's smile froze, her confidence wavering. Selena folded the napkin and set it down, her movements deliberate. The room shifted, the laughter dying down, replaced by an uneasy quiet. Selena stood her chair, barely making a sound. She reached for the microphone on the table, her movements slow, deliberate. If this is a joke, she said, her voice clear and steady, then I'll end it. The room exploded in laughter, thinking she was running away, humiliated. A few clapped like they'd won. Helena's smile was triumphant, but Selena didn't move. She stood there, her eyes scanning the crowd, her face unreadable. Damien pulled out his phone, his fingers moving fast. The massive LED screen behind them flickered to life. The room went quiet again, all eyes on the display. Text appeared bold and unmistakable. Asterisk CEO Crowell Tech, Damien Crowell. Asterisk. The laughter died. Helena's glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the floor. Adrian's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The guests froze, their faces a mix of shock and fear. Selena didn't flinch. She set the microphone down, her fingers, brushing it lightly, and stepped back. Damien stood, his presence filling the room without a single word. The screen kept scrolling, documents, contracts, numbers that made the $1.2 billion deal look small. The truth was out. Damien wasn't the broke son they'd mocked. He was the power behind the empire they worshipped. In the stunned silence, a man in a gray suit, his face flushed from the revelation, tried to laugh it off. Well, that's unexpected, he said, his voice shaky. He raised his glass as if to toast Damien. To new beginnings, right? The room watched, waiting for Damien's response. Selena stepped forward, her eyes locking on the man. You don't get to toast now, she said, her voice calm but firm. The man's glass lowered, his face red. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. Selena turned away, her movements graceful, and stood beside Damien. The screen behind them kept rolling, numbers and names flashing, each one a nail in the coffin of their lies. Helena stumbled forward, her face pale. Damien, sweetheart. I didn't know, she said, her voice shaking. She dropped to her knees, her gown pooling around her. It was a mistake. Adrian was next, his hands fumbling with his tie. We can work this out. New contracts, new deals. A few guests tried to recover, their voices loud and fake. We always knew you were special, Damien. He didn't look at them. His eyes were on Selena, steady and calm. She stood beside him, her face still watching the room unravel. Every word they said now sounded hollow, desperate. As the crowd scrambled, a woman in a sapphire gown, her face tight with panic, approached Selena. You knew, didn't you? She whispered, her voice desperate. You could have said something. Selena looked at her, her eyes steady. "Why would I?" she asked, her voice soft but cutting. The woman stepped back, her hands trembling. Selena turned away, her fingers brushing Damien's arm. The room was falling apart. Guests whispering, phones buzzing with news alerts. Selena didn't look at them. She didn't need to. Her silence was louder than their panic. Damien stepped forward, his voice low but clear. "All contracts are canceled. They're going to our competitors." The screen behind him flashed again. Stock tickers, headlines, numbers plummeting. Asterisk Crowell Group in freefall. Asterisk. The guests gasped, some pulling out their phones, others backing toward the doors. Helena's scream cut through the noise, raw and broken. Adrian slipped out, his face ashen, his briefcase clutched tight. The room was chaos, but Selena and Damien stood still, untouched by it. She reached for her bag, closing it with a soft click. That sound somehow felt louder than the screams. The next morning, the fallout was everywhere. News channels replayed the moment the screen lit up. The headlines: brutal asterisk, Crowell heir topples family empire. Asterisk. Selena walked through a hotel lobby, her face calm, her bag over her shoulder. A TV in the corner blared, showing Adrian's face, his law firm's logo crossed out. He'd been fired, his name dragged through the mud online. Selena didn't stop to watch. She kept walking, her steps steady, but her fingers brushed the handkerchief in her bag, the one Damien gave her years ago. A man at the front desk looked up, his eyes widening. Mrs. Crowell?" he asked, his voice hesitant. She nodded just once and kept going. The woman in the fur stole who'd mocked Selena's shoes was trending for all the wrong reasons. A viral post showed her laughing at the gala, her words quoted verbatim. Her brand deal was gone by noon, her social media silent. Selena saw the post on a phone screen as she passed a cafe, but she didn't stop. Her face didn't change. She tucked her hair behind her ear and kept walking, the city buzzing around her. The man with the cufflinks who'd sneered at her dress was spotted at the airport, his bags packed, his investors gone. The truth was relentless, catching up to each of them one by one. At a quiet dinner days later, Helena tried to salvage her image. She stood in a smaller venue, her voice trembling as she addressed a sparse crowd. "Nobody loves him. They just want his money," she shouted, her eyes wild. Adrian, still clinging to relevance, spread the rumor online. Asterisk, cold CEO, lonely life. Asterisk, a few guests nodded, eager to pile on. Rich, but nobody's real with him. Selena's eyes flickered, her fingers pausing on her glass. For a moment, her shoulders tensed, the only sign of the hit landing. The room leaned in, thinking they'd finally broken her. But then Damien stood, his hand finding Selena's. His voice was steady, loud enough for everyone to hear. "She didn't marry me for money. She chose me when she thought I had nothing." Selena looked at him, her eyes shining with tears she didn't let fall. "You could be a billionaire," she said, her voice soft but clear, "but to me, you're still the guy I fell for. Simple, honest." The room went silent. A few guests clapped, slow at first, then louder. The cameras caught it, the moment spreading online like wildfire. Asterisk, the love that broke an empire. Asterisk. As they walked out, the crowd parted, their faces a mix of awe and shame. Selena's hand was in Damien's, her step steady, her face calm. Helena's sobs echoed behind them, but Selena didn't turn. A memory flashed her and Damien in a diner years ago, sharing a single coffee, laughing over nothing. She squeezed his hand now, her fingers warm against his. The mansion, the wealth, the cruelty, it all faded as they stepped into the night. They had built something stronger, something real. The world kept turning, the headlines fading, but their truth held fast. You felt it too, the sting of being judged, the weight of being dismissed. But you kept going, didn't you? You held your ground even when it hurt. That's what matters. That's what lasts. You weren't wrong to believe in yourself. You were never alone. Where are you watching from? Leave a comment below and hit follow to walk with me through heartbreak, betrayal, and finally healing.